interim director for the Center for Humanities while our director of research is on leave. You'll forgive me, I have to make this boring for a second before I get back to fun stuff. I'd like to thank the College of Arts and Sciences and the Division of Research and Economic Development here at URI for funding this series. We have a couple other events this fall I just want to let you all know about. On October 3rd at 4 p.m. in the Hoffman Room in Swan Hall, we're going to have a showing of the film Sinners. On October 9th at 4 and the Welcome Center, we are very excited to have Nancy Price be speaking on stories from the soil, collage, culture, and the Black rural imagination. And on November 6th, and the Higgins Welcome Center as well, we will be hearing from Lee Francis on his work From Noble Savage to Tragic Chief, a brief history of natives in pop culture. This is our pop culture series. This is our opening event. We're going to have great events throughout the spring as well. And it's my great honor, although they've kind of introduced themselves, to introduce to you the extraordinary Rendition band. Thank you.
for joining us and showing us what democracy looks like. This is an ERB original. composed by a previous member, Nick Sandins, also known as LT Gray. A lot of us end up with nicknames in this band somehow.
Ben Hughes.
And also, well, composed by him and then arranged by Ben, is what I hear. But I could be wrong. It always had the democratic ideal of freedom at its heart musically, and then the chant evolved later as we applied it intentionally to politically oriented actions and performances. One thing I really enjoy about this band is that songs in ERB often begin one way and then evolve and change over time as we evolve and change as individuals and as a group. So this one, though, I want you to buckle up for. This is called Funk Apocalyptic. It's also an ERB original. It's composed by another longtime cast member, Avi David, who often donned a red onesie and star-shaped glasses. He composed the song for his band Trunk, and then he arranged it for our street band. Hopefully it feels a little something like the name implies, an expression of funk in the end times.
hear me? Good. This next song, called Red, White, and Shiny, is in a way our most complex and yet our simplest song. It might even be called our signature song. It's a 12-bar blues based on Blues for Ben by Dan Black and Walter Starr. We're an open band, and this song is one of the most accessible to our new members, which we are blessed to have many on the stage right now. We have adapted it and made it our own through structure, through practice, through composition, and through arrangement and performance. It draws from the blues tradition while expressing our unique personality as a band. Red, White, and Shiny.
taking a breather. They get to take a breather. All right. Well, as you know, we're just going to do away with those and take out a little TED Talk journey, the founding of the band, what we're all about, kind of our mission, why we do what we do. My name is Mike Gore, and I'm one of the original founding 5 members of the band, along with Lydia Stein, Lauren Coleman, Millie Tibbs, and David Simons. We founded the band back in 2008 in basically the Monahasset Mills Steel Yard area of Olneyville in the Bucket of Providence, which is an area that is really like steeped in a tradition of punk, of art spaces, of feminist and queer spaces, and really doing things in a revolutionary way, and they really helped support us when we were first becoming what we would become. We started the Rendition band itself. Came from a whole bunch of us coming together and really just wanting to use music in a way to try to contribute positively to our community. We all came from different kind of like protest backgrounds and had, at the time, basically around 2006, 2008, all been experiencing a similar concern for the direction that our country was heading. It wasn't too long after 9/11, which tragic and awful and terrible as it was, after like mourning and shock, one of the first thoughts that I had was, well, shit, now they can do whatever they want. And soon afterwards, the Patriot Act was passed and we began down a road that has brought us to where we are today. So we saw a need to go out and protest, but we wanted to do something in our own way, so we decided that we wanted to try to do that with music. For me, a lot of that inspiration for the gaggle of folks who would come together and do that actually came from New Orleans. I was in grad school at Harvard at the Ed School when Katrina happened and toured all over New Orleans and the surrounding states. And we went down to do some service work, and I put it on my credit card, and we'd have 12-hour days working at schools in the lower Ninth Ward, and then like nearly 12-hour nights going out to experience the culture. I got to see the unequivocal, Grammy-winning, genre-changing, world-changing Rebirth Brass Band for the first time at their home turf at the Maple Leaf. And it changed my perception and understanding of what music could be, and joy and culture, and made me like begin to think about picking up my trumpet again. After that, I moved to Providence to teach, and quickly ran into world-famous Luddite hardcore band, then known as the Wachir Brigade, now known as Undertow, and was inspired by them to believe that maybe I could do something similar. So a group of us came together and decided to found this band, and we had with it some founding principles. One of the key ones was that any note was better than no note, which meant that anyone, yeah, it tracks still today. And it's an adaptation of a Miles Davis quote, but in our mind, as none of us really came to this with a, like, we came with musical background, but not for what we were doing. So we wanted to go out and protest and do it with music. And we also quickly realized that we should like probably get better at music. And the best way to do that was to become a band. So we became a band and started working on that. And that tradition we would come to learn. One of our founding members, Lydia Stein, was very well aware of it, and David Simons. But we would learn was part of the honk tradition, which started out in Davis Square in 2006, inspired by the bread and puppet work and brass band, rich brass band traditions of our country. And here in the South, and activist communities. So we came with the honk community up, as well as developing in Providence, the community of Pronk, which continues today. You can come see all of us in Davis on honk weekend, and then down in Providence on Indigenous Peoples Day. With that, our goal was really to then use music to support positive causes in our community, as well as draw attention to important community issues. Most recently, we banded together with pretty much all the other brass bands in town for the Pull Together Festival to try to raise attention to all of the amazing organizations in our community doing really important work that we're about to see their funding cut under recent administration changes. We've been doing this work long before localish spoken word poet Jared Paul back fighting against the LNG pipeline in the Providence, among other things. As you see, we sometimes dress a little silly. We all kind of try to approach this as a way of thinking about just how we want to represent ourselves and what makes us feel the best and empowered in the way that we want to feel, and oftentimes try to bring our activism through our messaging and our clothing, which might seem like a simple thing and maybe no big deal, but between, like, sometimes it gets hard to figure out where to put it on certain things. Or sometimes you put it on and you go play the Newport St. Patrick's Day parade, and then you're told later that you can't have political messaging on your bodies because what if somebody wanted to put, like a swastika on their body? Then we'd have to let them. And we're like, well, I think there's a difference, but I guess we just won't play that parade. But we play other St. Patrick's Day parade, mostly recently Providence Parade and a bunch of others. We also played our longest running gig was Providence Pride, which we've been playing as pretty much as long as we've really been a band, so probably about like almost 17 years now. And I think this year we played nearly 17 total Pride festivals all around Rhode Island. It felt that way anyway, but we really tried to go out and support it everywhere that we could. Our community and all the members in it. To hear some of that represented some of the songs that we play as well. We played at the State House. We've played kickoffs of summer after-school program, community events, second line funeral parades for local heroes who've fallen. Played in support of fundraisers for Sojourner House and their work around domestic abuse. The Institute for Nonviolence and their work in our community to try to keep everyone safe. Played for gun rights advocacy, played for all kinds of things we like to say. The cause is true and the time is right that we will come out and represent if we can. One of our mottos is make loud, and our goal is to interrupt regularly scheduled life with spontaneous moments of raucous musical joy. As James Baldwin described the artist in his essay, The Creative Process, as the incorrigible disturber of the peace, I think we might sometimes fall into that category. We're an open band with probably about 40 plus members right now. It ranges. We play gigs with 10 or less, and gigs with 40 or more. And over the course of our band, we're probably pushing about 200 total members over the lifetime of it at this point. Anyone can join of any level of experience and do any really thing that they want, from flag waving and dancing to, we once had a gentleman some of you might know from Providence who played a fireball throwing tuba. He's known for other things with fire, but he's not allowed to do that anymore as far as I know. But we invite people to come learn with us and play with us regardless of their musical background or skill. And we consider that to be in itself a kind of revolutionary or at least uncommon space. With that, we do have certain expectations of how we treat one another, and we hold each other to that. And we develop those expectations together. And we do our best to try to get better, and to get better as an organization and a community with one another and with our community. This is from one of our recent, actually this is from last Hunk Festival, or maybe 2 Hunk Festivals ago, something along those lines up in Davis Square. And those are some of the times where, if you don't know, active street bands come from all over the country. This is part of a movement both nationally and internationally. Many other countries have their own forms of street band culture. This is one of ours. We are also inspired heavily by the jazz traditions of New Orleans, jazz being America's original art form, and as Leland Baker, amazing saxophonist and educator, put it, black expressive music, as a group of predominantly white musicians. That tradition is not lost on us, and we do our best to honor it and to aspire to it in our own way. Sometimes we get a little loud. In about 17 years of playing in kind of like non-residential parts of Providence, stopping by around 9:30, because noise ordinances didn't used to kick in until about 10 or 11. We never had like a single issue really. But that started to change in the last year as Steve Alquist reporting on it expresses one perspective relating to the strike at, I believe, it was Butler Hospital. And it's concerning because my perspective on it is that music is now being seen as noise, and protest is not necessarily seen as speech, or at least not protected speech, and expression is not currently being protected in the daytime if it is bothering anyone. To me, at this point in time, I'm particularly concerned about that. So, as one of our band members put it, gentrification will push us out to other creative areas. So if you hear us rehearsing in your space, maybe give the police a call and tell them how much you appreciate it and enjoy it. Because if you get more of those calls than calls that say like, I'm trying to go to bed and it's almost 9:30, maybe we'll be allowed to keep playing. I guess like a final note is that Baldwin again, in his essay, The Creative Process, described the role of the artist as trying to make the world a more humane dwelling place. And that has always been a part of our mission. And we just kind of add to that we are trying to make it a little bit more fun and weird while we're at it. So I hope that we bring that here tonight. I hope you see that here, and I hope that you come see us on the streets in the future and come see us in Providence, and we'll come back down to see you down here. Thank you for having us. All right, we're gonna play some more for you. Oh, one last thing, I almost forgot. The band name, Extraordinary Rendition Band. How many know what Extraordinary Rendition means in here? Show of hands. I'm a teacher. I got one, I got two, I got three, a couple more reluctant hands. There we go, 4 or 5. The practice of kidnapping people, bringing them to other countries to torture them because it's not allowed in the United States. So that's where the name came from. It was coined by David Simons, who's founded a whole bunch of bands, including a whole bunch of bands all over. And we felt it represented what we tried to do of having a unique version of music and a song that is our own, while also drawing attention to important community issues. We have some great quotes up here from Rhode Island Monthly. Massive, skilled, enthusiastic local artists who pour their hearts out into the streets of Providence with the sole intention of spreading joy and music to anyone within earshot. Most recently, Shindigs from Motif Magazine had mistaken us for a bachelorette party at a gig, and then realized that as we emerged like a musical clown car, we were in fact Providence's own ERB. And I really appreciated his quote as someone who spent time in marching band and followed the great HBCU brass traditions. He was thrilled to hear this massive wall of sound. So I guess we'll bring some more of that for you tonight, if that's all right. Thank you guys so much.
wardrobe malfunction. I'm Carolyn Lipinski. Hello. I teach here also. That song you just heard was Cumbia Rebelde. Cumbia is a Latin American genre of dance music that originated among enslaved Africans and indigenous peoples in Colombia in the 19th century. The original Cumbia Rebelde was recorded by the Colombian band Puerto Candelaria in 2011. We have adapted the lyrics a little in our translation. Our next song should probably, the title should probably provide its own introduction. It is called Rage Against the Medley. This mashup of Rage Against the Machine numbers was arranged by one of our members, Nat Heffernan.
is one that we often play at demonstrations. The name of this song is The Time Is Now, Trust the Poets, and it was created in collaboration with local spoken word poets as well as local storytellers for PBD Fest in 2019. Here it is.
Guys, Mr. Johnson.
He observed, when ERB shows up at something, then you know you're on the right side of the history. And that's quite a compliment, and we're really proud that someone would say something like that. But I want to note that it's probably not actually possible for ERB to be so consistently on the right side of history if we weren't open, collective, leaderless, and inclusionary. So I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I want to zoom out first. Brass bands have a really long association with protest and the resilience movements, and they also have a long association with war. The activist street band community certainly didn't invent music as resistance. We did not pioneer playing in the streets. And we draw from a global legacy of musicians who put sound into space in service of justice, pleasure, or freedom, including fanfare traditions across Europe, carnival in South America and in the Caribbean, Haitian rara bands, second-line traditions of New Orleans, among many, many others. Around the world, people have used sound to interrupt business as usual, to object, to assemble, to gather, to make demands, to celebrate victories. Whether it's youth protesters blowing air horns at Lebanese parliamentarians who illegally extended their own political terms, that happened, to popular music helping name the desires of the 2011 Egyptian revolution, that also happened. Music can really energize moments of social change. That's what we aim to participate in. But a little backstory here, right? The contemporary brass band, the one that we sort of see now, originated as a fusion between military and folk music on adapted European military instruments and have been used to express militarism, but also solidarity and resistance and entertainment. So for instance, Balkan-style brass traditions stem from the first Serbian uprising in 1804. So the trumpet was used to gather people together to announce battles. And then it becomes an instrument of entertainment during downtime because soldiers were transposing popular folk tunes for fun, and that resulted in the sort of distinctive fiddle-like lines that we associate with Balkan brass music. But the point is that brass horns, including trumpets, let's hear trumpet, trombones, flugelhorns, we don't have any of those, French horns, we don't have any of those either today, sousaphones, are some of the most widely disseminated instruments in the world, and they have traveled far and wide on the wings of militarism and of colonialism. The earliest U.S. marching bands were most likely the fifers and the drummers and the trumpeters and the pipers of colonial-era militias. So like their European predecessors, these bands regulated daily life in military camps. African-American marching band rituals began during the Revolutionary War when black soldiers were assigned instruments because white colonists were afraid of an uprising, and so they were not assigned weapons. And those musical traditions developed with each passing war, and their influences spread. And so currently, American HBCUs, for instance, have a very robust marching band culture that came out of those military origins. But the military histories interact with the here and now, obviously. Brass instruments require you often to play with other people. A band is by definition a collective thing. The militaries are almost without exception hierarchical, they're majority male, and so when street bands like ours specifically dedicate space to women and gender minorities, while at the same time making decisions collectively or acting in service of peace, we are transforming entire histories and social relationships that are associated with the instruments that we use, and I think that is really cool. Community bands. Community bands as a phenomenon emerged more widely during industrialization. It was part of the spread of factory work, and they flourished all over the U.S. and Europe, and they were attached to congregations and factories and towns, and they were both creative outlets and also symbols of solidarity, and they were almost exclusively male. So they got more popular with a sudden increase in available raw metals, meaning that instruments could be made more cheaply, but also industrialization itself. Company owners were trying to basically foster a hobby that would keep the workforce occupied in its spare time. Brass bands fit the bill. And so these musical spaces, which were meant to pacify and distract people from their poverty and their economic exploitation, wound up at some points becoming mechanisms for channeling anger and action and connection. Brass obviously lends itself to protest particularly well. As you have doubtless noticed, it is loud. The sound carries, it cuts across crowds, but music at political demonstrations is often a kind of a ritual event. It helps remind people of who they are and what they're doing and of our place in a bigger movement. And maybe most importantly, at least for me, this kind of music can capture a brief sort of transient glimpse at how the world might be, right? It gives us a little bit of a vision into the future. And over time, the phenomenon of music as resistance in the U.S. developed a particularly close relationship to the Southeast. Benevolent societies and mutual aid organizations emerged in the 1700s to help and support free and enslaved Black Americans cope with financial hardships, and those included illness and funeral costs. In New Orleans specifically, but also elsewhere. These groups eventually morphed into the kind of social aid and pleasure society, and were the force behind the parties for which New Orleans became quite famous. Although they are now well known and highly commodified, these parades, it's important to remember, were initially a response to racial exclusion and oppression. And contemporary New Orleans brass bands such as Rebirth, Brass Band, New Birth, and Soul Rebels have mostly maintained the currency of brass music by updating tradition with elements specifically of funk and hop. But these contemporary groups are still largely, if not entirely, male. And because of that, when we talk about like musicology and research on New Orleans brass band, a lot of that has focused on racial identity and how an ensemble of portable instruments that was originally associated with the European military became racially encoded as black in that city. And because of the relative absence of women in brass bands overall, gender identity is like kind of an absent category, right? Gender matters, but we don't talk about it. And band's evolution as tools of protest is also what we like to call gendered. At least since the Renaissance, here's a fun fact. If they played at all, women were directed towards feminine instruments, meaning those that could be played without, quote, making faces or assuming indecorous postures. Bass scales or cellos, for instance, which are held between the knees, are considered indecorous, among other things. And as one turn of the century analyst wrote, although the sweetness of the flute disposed it for female players, other wind instruments distort the cheeks and redden the face. Several types of horns induce an unbecoming deluge of saliva. You will see some on the stage behind me. For centuries, women's appearance on stage in any role at all was not just frowned upon, but actually banned outright. And for middle and upper class women especially, the social sanction of making a display of yourself in public really violated the norms of propriety and modesty. And so when women performers first became more common on stage, they were often from lower social classes. The earliest documented US women's-only bands actually emerged from family musical groups in the 1850s or thereabouts. And while some toured with vaudeville troupes, most were actually local to one area, and they provided the same sort of entertainment services that their male counterparts did. But even in the 20th century, I would add even in the 21st, there was a lot of resistance to gender integration in music. A music director lamented that the affiliation of musicians with labor unions, again, a proud tradition of protest, was actually forcing professional orchestras to accept female players, saying, women harpists are admitted to be more desirable than men, the harp being essentially a woman's instrument. It requires such delicate fingering. You will find everywhere that women are in demand of this work. But nature never intended their sex to be cornetists, trombonists, and players of wind instruments. In the first place, they're not as strong enough to play as well as men. Another point is that women cannot possibly play brass instruments and look pretty, and why should they spoil their good looks? It seems, philosopher Carolyn Hoffmeyer observes wryly, that the female artist cannot escape being regarded as an aesthetic object, even while she is actively engaged in producing other aesthetic objects. And unless we be lulled into thinking that these exclusions are artifacts of a distant past, we ought to remember that the distinguished Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra only opened its ranks to women in 1997, at which time I was 13. During World War II, all women swing bands gained a foothold when millions of men left for military service. These groups at the time were mostly racially segregated in the United States, and in the late 1930s, the International Sweethearts of Rhythm became the first racially integrated all-women's band in the United States, and they were featuring some of the best musicians of the day. At the outset, it included Black, Latina, Asian, Native American, and biracial women, and in 1943 it began inducting white women. It was physically dangerous for an integrated band to travel in the US South at that time, and so lighter-skinned musicians actually darkened their skin to blend in on tour. But because there's very little documentation of these bands, their impact on history and also contemporary musical practice is largely unseen. It remains something of a lost story. But at the same time, gender is still a thing in brass music. Even now, girls in school bands are often steered towards flutes and woodwinds, so like lighter sounds, and away from percussion and brass. And because of this, women and femme brass players often come to their instruments later in life. They often have less formal training or more catch-up to do. They still take way fewer solos in public, and the point really is that brass music is still kind of stamped with the expectations of masculinity, and contemporary musicians of all genders really have to figure out what that means for us here and now. And so in other words, even given our explicit values about access and democracy and inclusion as a community in the honk scene, street bands still really struggle with some of the legacies that have shaped us. We still make our home in cities large and small. We still have to deal with the economy in one way or another. We're still part of the very gendered and very racialized and very class-based power structures that exist in cities all over the country.
So we basically deal with the same challenges that the world as a whole deals with, and we have to figure out how to deal with that too. Figure out what it means. So, as you might have guessed, figuring out what that means is a big part of how we operate. And it extends beyond individual bands into the honk scene. As Mike said earlier, honk is a free street music festival that happens in cities across the country and increasingly across the globe. And it identifies with urban struggles, but this meaning of activism in the honk network actually varies from band to band quite a bit. Some groups define activism as explicitly engagement with protest. If you're not getting arrested, it doesn't count. Others define it as supporting social change work in any number of ways, often by supporting pickets or rallies or fundraisers, and others define it as being present in your community when your community needs you. Responding to this conversation, festival organizers in Boston have sought in the last couple of years to really orient the festival itself towards community solidarity. So for instance, from 2016 on, they've organized musicians to play outside of an ICE detention center during the festival. So bands are never one thing, right? At times, they're vessels of public political comprehension. And at times, they're building blocks of local and civic organizing, and at times, we are commercial entertainment bands, at times we come to universities, at times we're community supports, in the case of festivals and parades or even fundraisers. And at times, the primary focus is internal, as places where we as musicians explore our own musical growth or simply blow off steam. Sometimes they act as mutual aid, and almost always they're members of the cultural vanguard. But what I really kind of want to end by emphasizing is that the internal organization of these groups, how they function, how they make decisions, how they choose to comport themselves in the world, actually I think affects the external politics of a city and a community in a way that is greater than the sum of its parts. So in the case of ERB, that means us being leaderless and open and believing that everyone has music within them and working to elicit that music together, and believing that everyone is capable of assuming responsibility in a group, and that we can actually live in a world where we make beautiful music, and we treat each other decently, and we hold each other to high standards, and we are available when the community needs us to celebrate the opening of a shelter. And that more than that, we can do it without excluding anyone, right? These practices reflect our values. And it doesn't mean we're perfect, trust me, we're not. But it is part of how bands like ours try to build the world that we want to see. And that for me is a profoundly moving idea. And that for me is actually a model for democracy. So I'll end with this from a former bandmate, actually, who used to play with us, who says, in Austin, Texas, once we were playing a performance at a homeless shelter. This one woman in the crowd, I overheard her say, who needs pain pills when you have something like this? And I thought that was so powerful, and telling of what we bring to the people, and we bring it in corners that are so dark, and we shine our sonic light, and how powerful and transformational that can be for everyone. Thank you.
our next song is titled Clandestinito. It's a mashup of Manny Pachao's song from 2000, Clandestino, which is a song protesting the treatment of immigrants, and Luis Fonsi's and Justin Bieber's hit Despacito. We invite you to sing along with the lyrics, which are printed on the sheet you should find.
So, hello everybody, my name is Tori. The small child who has been kissing me around, that's Colin. His favorite lullaby is Red, White, and Shiny. And we've been in the band longer than he's been alive, so he just lives this stuff. And so does our other child, Kevin, around here somewhere. So anyway, I'm going to introduce a couple of our band members and have them answer a question about the band. And we will hear a little bit more about how things are in the band now. So Amelia is going to go first. Amelia, can you tell us, so this one is the part. Sure. So the French.
Hey.
There you go. All right. Can you tell us what it means for ERB to be an open band?
Yeah, I can agree.
And how does ERB operate as a group?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Amelia. Thank you for that question, Tori. Huge fan of your work. Yeah. So an open band means that you can kind of see the band performing on the street, and you can sort of walk up and go, whoa, I really think I enjoy doing that. And then you can just ask anyone there, and they'll go, hey, we would love it if you came and you played with us. And here's the phone number of someone in the band that, wait, what instrument do you want to play? Oh yeah, we have 5, and you can play one of them. Just ask us, and then all we do, you come to rehearsals, and then after that you can sign a little form saying you agree with all of our beautiful band values that we've discussed here. We're going to discuss a little more of, and with band norms, and then you sign a form that says you agree, and then you can come to the gigs, and you can start whenever you're ready. No pressure. No pressure. And we operate as a group by discussing, voting on, and organizing gigs in person, and also asynchronously in this modern world. We use stuff like Slack, we use stuff like GroupMe, but you don't have to be super tech savvy. You can ask anybody who will help you to learn these things. And our favorite's the Gigo, which is a thing that hunk bands used to organize, and that's how we determine who's available for every gig. So yeah, it is a beautiful and rewarding group effort, and everyone's participation is essential and appreciated.
So next up, Maggie B. You're a relatively new member of ERB. Can you tell us what it is about the band's mission or values that made you want to join?
Yes, hi, thanks Tori. So I joined the band in April, and a family member of mine was actually a part of the band first, my wonderful sister-in-law who's playing the cymbals tonight. And I at that point lived in Connecticut and saw all over her Instagram just how fun this looked. And when I learned that I was moving to the Providence area, I was like, I definitely want to join that band. But I also had some trepidation because I had not played the saxophone since middle school, which is many decades ago. I appreciate how open and inclusive this band was. It was not an issue. I've been completely welcomed in and have been learning and growing as a musician since I joined. And some other things that attracted me to the band was the commitment to social justice and activism. I love our red, white, and shiny outfits. It's so much fun to see how each gig. I really believe in the power of joy as resistance, and I feel like we're living in such a time of uncertainties and just difficulties, and I feel like being able to come and be a part of this band is a way for me to be positively engaged in my community and to feel like I'm bringing joy to myself and joy to our bandmates and joy to the community, and that feels really, really important and really powerful in this moment. And I also, the day that I joined, there was like 6 or 7 new people who joined as well. So I asked any of the other new bandmates if they had anything that they wanted to share as well. My bandmate Louie, who's playing soprano tonight, shared that he first encountered the band at a protest and was like, I really want to be a part of that. Joined the band the same night I did, and just shares that one of the things that he still loves so much about the band is the fun energy of the music and the commitment to social justice and activism that we have through our music. So thanks so much for giving me an experience.
we don't dress in such a subtle way in order not to have fun. You realize that the way we dress is in order to make a splash. We go to a lot of consignment shops, some of the best in the country, and Salvation Armies, Savers, and we always look for red, white, and shiny. Those are our colors. And so we somehow find unity in this very eclectic look, I guess. We've got lots of variety, but it's always red, white, and shiny. I say that because every day is Halloween for us when we play, because we're always figuring out what our costumes will be, and it's always a lot of fun. So right away, there's collaboration within our organization. We are collaborating with each other, getting to know each other. We have these swaps for our costumes from time to time, and we sometimes even make costumes together. And we try to just produce something that is going to kind of make an impact as we go out on stage. You probably have noticed that we're loud, usually. What we try to do is play music that's loud, in your face, and danceable. And we don't think that that's a bad idea. It sort of pulls people together. We often play very sweet melodic tunes too, but the majority of our things are loud and fun. And I think the important thing there is to realize that social change and resistance and protest and fun can blend together. It's important that, I don't know, some of you may recall the people's historian Howard Zinn. He always talked about, we may not get where we want to go, but we should have some fun along the way, and it should be satisfying for the people who are participating in resisting and promoting working for a better world, which is often hard and difficult to do. In terms of collaboration, ERB casts a very wide net in promoting peace and justice. We work with many organizations. This does not just happen, we work at it. We have about 45 to 75 gigs a year. If we look back over our 19 or 20 year history, that's what happens. We have some years that are a little lighter than other years, but I think the biggest year was 79. I know that I've been using the number 60 as sort of what we often do in terms of gigs. That history makes us part of the fabric of Providence, of the metropolitan area, and of Rhode Island, and even beyond. We go outside the state not infrequently. We're a big band, and what you've probably noticed is that we're intergenerational. And I think that's very important because we bring different perspectives from our different age groups. And we have different experiences, and that again is another kind of blend that we're trying to promote out in the world, but we try to do it by being a good example of that. Our music, I think, is accessible, and all factors in generating, there are many factors in generating collaborations, all the ones that I just mentioned. But people and organizations find us, and we also find organizations to work with us. It's a two-way street, and I think that's important. And that's because we are part of the community. So people hear us, we play all these gigs, and that leads to other people saying, gee, I wonder if they could work with our organization, if they come do a fundraiser for us, so we would do this or that. And so there's a kind of, it evolves and it grows very organically. And that's how we pick up a lot of members too. We pick up members because we're out in the community, and we always say at our gigs, it's an open band, and do you play something? And a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't know really. We say, well, come. We'll take anybody who is interested in learning an instrument, and we help the person to do that. It's not just a case of you have to be a really first-rate musician right off the bat. But I think what you've discovered is that we make a pretty good sound, even though we come from all of these different levels of playing. We do pretty well together, and I think that's because we practice hard. There's a lot of collaboration there every week. for 2 to 3 hours. And then we do all these gigs, and we're expected to practice at home as well. We don't accept just any gig, and I think that's important. We do find organizations, and organizations find us, but it's always the mission that we're thinking about. What is the mission of that organization, and is it consistent with our values? And we have turned down gigs because we thought, no, this isn't quite the right match, or we don't want to support something that we don't fully believe in. If there is a new organization and we're not so sure about it, we do the research. And we have different gig champions who do some of that research, or they find other people to help them do that research. But we do the research on that organization and we discuss it. And there are times when we say, is this the gig that we want to do? And each week we have a meeting. And again, that meeting after practice is a time when we can exercise our democratic values again and say, is this something we want to do? And we either try to reach consensus, or we vote, or we try to figure out, is this something that is in our wheelhouse. Ultimately, collaborations evolve. And they evolve because we as a band are really integrated in the community. The fact that we're such a large band, I think, is important, because that means we have a lot of people connected with different organizations in different places throughout Providence and the wider Rhode Island region. And that helps us find places for us to connect with. I want to just give you, in ending, I just want to give you a few examples of some of the organizations we work with. And this is really just a tiny, tiny sample. Sojourner House. That's an advocacy and hands-on organization in Providence that is trying to develop healthy relationships and safety in households. They do education, they promote safe housing and work against domestic violence and much more. And we, every year, for the last several years, we do their big donor gala at one of the big hotels in Providence. And we go there, and we've developed a nice relationship with that organization. The Providence Student Union is another one. That's an organization that is working to empower students so that they can steer their own education and get better and better services within the educational system that they're part of. So they're trying to make improvement. They're trying to find themselves, learning how to grow and practice the skills and habits of democracy in so doing. There was a mention of the temporary, the 45 temporary homeless shelters that have been developed, Echo Village is called. We were called upon to herald, to acknowledge that was opening a year ago or so. And it was a really wonderful event. And it's something that we really believe in. And so we hope that we'll continue to be involved. 2 other organizations, DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality. They do low-income housing. They focus on low-income housing for people of color in particular. And we are beginning to establish, we did have a relationship with them, and they have a new director, and we're establishing a relationship with them now. There are many other organizations. I'll just mention in terms of the peace specifically, the peace issue specifically, the Golden Rule, which is a yacht that went into the Pacific in the 1960s into the atomic bomb testing zone. That yacht was a protest yacht, and the people who were on it were committing a civilly disobedient act by going into the atomic bomb test zone, challenging the government to drop a bomb on them. If they couldn't do that, then why would they do it anywhere else? Of course, it's part of the message there. But also, just please try to stop funding war. Let's fund things that are more important than funding war. Anyway, that yacht was 60s was gained a lot of press, but it still exists, and it just recently made a tour up and down the Pacific coast, and then up and down the Atlantic coast, and then down the Mississippi River as well. And always bringing that message: let's stop the nuclear threat, and try to get that money to go elsewhere, and not just to the Pentagon and to bombs that should never be used anyway. Collaboration is built. It grows out of enduring relationships. That's what we're all about. We do all sorts of things: pride parades, elderly housing, soup kitchens, cancer survivors. But key to all of this is that social justice and peace are not two different things. They really are connected. Peace and social justice are really related. You can't have one. You don't have social justice if you're not really addressing the peace issue. So what we need to do is see these as part of a continuum. And I think our band, if you look at our values, we have these a mission statement and a values statement. It's online. If you look at it really carefully, it emphasizes the kinds of things I've just been talking about, and it also emphasizes having fun when we do this. Thank you.
Sean, you have been in quite a few punk bands besides ERB, including Minor Mishap Marching Band. So would you please tell us about your experience of how ERB fits into the larger culture of activist street bands?
Thank you. Yes, I joined the honk scene in 2014 in Somerville, Massachusetts, playing with a band called Humanities. And I remember seeing ERB for the first time at that festival in classic red, white, and shiny, and wearing a lot of slogans on their backs. This band struck me as the most activist band that was there, giving a lot of messaging, a lot of chanting that was happening, including the audience and chants and dances and all of that. And I have since, played in Minor Mishap out of Austin, Texas, and Environmental Approach Ground in Chicago, Cigarettes in Rio de Janeiro. And as the honk festival has spread in the last 15 years or so, different bands in different countries, particularly the brass band scene in France, is very active. The brass band scene in at least 5 cities in Brazil is very active as well. A lot of these bands have used their position as bringers of joy and joyful noise, but also sort of a sense of a seriousness to some of these protests as well. In other countries, like, for example, back in 2016, I believe it was, Cigarettes was one of the several bands in Rio that was protesting large cuts that were happening by the government, the Bolsonaro government, against teacher salaries and benefits, which of course is something that never happened, I'm sure. But the position of bands that I've seen as I've traveled, and I've seen bands in other countries, be called to the utility of lending something vital to protest movements and something vital to actual days of protest. A lot of the times, bands attract people who would not normally be at a protest because the music element and the sense of fun community that music automatically sets off in people's minds bring people out. A lot of families come and see when bands are performing. Many of you may be familiar with Bread and Puppet up in Glover, Vermont, whose puppet shows are interspersed with more serious political messaging, because when children are walking through the park with their parents and see puppets, they go and see the puppets, and then the message comes and hits them when the parents are there watching their kids watching the show. So there's a huge role that I've seen, and it's been in some countries for many decades. In places like Brazil, it's only been in the last decade as more brass instruments reach a wider population down there, that people have wanted to use brass bands in those contexts, as activist contexts. Not every band that plays in the street has an activist context to it, but a lot of them, particularly in the last couple of years, have found themselves in more demand, being asked to come out to play some of these protests, sometimes just as, some people with drums and megaphones to give some chant support and also try to keep a parade moving. there's a certain energy that's brought to those kinds of movements and those kinds of events by bands, and we've all talked about how some of the many things that we've been called upon to do, and many of the things that we seek out, because we understand that that's part of our identity, and that's part of what we want to be doing with what time we have. And we also really enjoy playing the music as well.
They're two ERB members who've been here from the very early days, and like I used to talk about how the band has changed or not changed over the last 17 years here. Is that correct? You guys know better than me.
Yeah, it's a while now, yeah.
The band has not changed. We are made loud.
Yeah, that was my first thought with that part. It's like, how have we changed? Well, we're not 6 people in living room anymore. So we've gotten a little bigger. We don't fit anyone to this point. It's more complicated to run. We don't make decisions over beer after a gig. Committees.
And now we are a nonprofit.
Now we are a nonprofit. Corporate. But I think one of the remarkable things is I've listened to other people talk. People talk about we're intergenerational. From like get-go. From like the first year, we had a multi-decade spread of it. That stays the same.
That stays the same. And the musicality level, like I hadn't played a flute since grade 4.
Yeah, and I walked in and I was like 7 years out of active playing, me too. It was nerve-wracking, but we did it.
I mean, the thing, well, our music choices are different. Now we don't.
I don't know. I played Mercy the first night.
Well, that's the same. I was thinking of Hawaii 5-0.
Different kids on people's backs.
Yeah. Your kids are all grown up to the point where you can leave them home, and mine are here.
Yeah. Ken was asking before the gig tonight, it's okay if I bring my kid on my back, because we've all pretty much, any of us that have spawned have had a kid on the back during the gig. Pretty much. It's remarkable how little has changed. Things that were spur of the moment are now tradition. When everyone, our colors are red, white, and shiny. I remember before our first official gig as ERB, someone said, what colors should we wear? And someone said, how about red and white? And someone said, it's shiny. And now it's like a tradition when there was a spur of the moment.
Or the Shake 5 when we enter.
They don't know about that.
They don't. You secrets.
But it's remarkable, I think, mostly the change of faces over the years. I think there's only about 4 or 5 of us in the band right now who were there that first year. How the values have stayed the same, and I think those things that we established in that first year. That first year, not the first year we played private, the first couple of years we played private, we played every year. Even when the band went to Seattle, a few of us who couldn't go played private. We've played a lot of these things every year, a lot of these covers that Paul was mentioning, these relationships are old. They call us, we don't call them. That's a change. It's a comfortable space. It feels like family. It's a wonderful band. Not a good place to sing.
Sure, that sounds lovely. So thank you very much. Great. So Dan can come on back out here, and I'll take that toddler back because my husband Chris is the next speaker.
Last tune? Last tune. Two last tunes? Two last tunes. One last one.
Aaron, Croaky Toddler. Step 2, retrieve sousaphone. Step 3, introduce song. Our last song for the evening, I think if I put any more, both of my kids are going to revolt, so, is the URI's adaptation of Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. Originally recorded and performed by Cannibal Adderley, written by pianist Zoe Zavadil in 1966. There's many bands like us who have played this song in many different ways. But thanks for coming out tonight, and please enjoy our version.
2, 3, 4.
Thank you so much for having me, URI.